Hop onto the shuttle bus this week as we discuss part two of our Of June discussion. We are your hosts, Faith and Sapph. Welcome to Shuttle Bus Podcast. Good evening. Welcome to the shuttle bus this week as we continue our discussion of June. This week we will be discussing swimming in Miami, designer Skyline, and Panda Bear. I'm your host, Faith, with my wonderful co-host, Sapph.
Hey, Faith.
Hey, Sapph, would you like to kick off our discussion on Swimming in Miami, the first song on tonight's list?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I guess something I find interesting is a little diversion from my point, but I'll lead into it. Um, is that a lot of these tracks have a very long intro and a very long outro, and I like the instrumental. So, from the instrumental of the beginning, it kind of sounds like a Game Boy, and it kind of has this like continuous looping track that I really enjoy. But I think that's really cool, and I love the fact that a lot of this older work is kind of 8-bit.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people describe especially of June specifically as like having this 8-bit sound, which is really fun. I really appreciate that sound. It's really cool.
Yeah, I don't know why he doesn't include that in a lot of his like newer stuff, but I tend to really enjoy it. But
I will say that I feel like I did touched on this last week or last time as we discussed captains and cruise ships, but the way he uses autotune in Of June is so different than his other works, and I kind of dig the autotune in Of June. And like Swimming in Miami, I feel like is a really good example of like his style that he used autotune in at that time. So I don't know. I just find it's very electronic, mechanical almost sounding. Like he's very heavy on the autotune back then, but it kind of really adds this cool sound to it.
yeah, I noticed that as well when I was listening through it, and this is not the first time I've heard Swimming in Miami. It's the first time I've heard designer Skyline, I think. And I can't believe that that's the first time I've heard it. But all of these songs, and especially Swimming in Miami, because it's such a huge, I guess, a renowned song in the fan base, it really gives off the classic Owl City Dreamlike lyrics, which, of course, everybody loves. And I guess that's why a lot of people are kind of like, oh, this is not like the new stuff is not Adam because he has less of that. But I kind of like the mix that he does in his new stuff. But you know, for Swimming in Miami, it's definitely very classic, dreamy lyrics.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too, and it's like it's been a while since I've really sat down and listened to Of June. Um, but man, I've been listening to Of June a lot today, just on like repeat. And it's just the nostalgia, especially with Swimming in Miami. Something about Swimming in Miami just gives me this like nostalgia of when, because I was like, I used to listen to that song all the time when I first started listening to Owl City. So to listen to it again after so long of not really listening to it, it was like, it just was so fun to be able to kind of like almost rediscover this song that I used to listen to all the time.
Oh, that's such a good point. I love that. I absolutely love that. And I know we talked about captains and cruise ships last week, so that's kind of how it felt for me too. While we've been going through our notes and really digging into this EP, that's what it feels like to me is so nostalgic, and you just feel like you're a kid again almost, which is kind of nice. So I think most adults can say that at some point in your life you wish that you could go back.
Yeah, I don't know. I've really been like thinking about that lately. Like I enjoy the period of life I am in right now, but there's just something about that like I thought, life was super chaotic and busy when I was in high school, but also like the simplicity of just going back to like when I was in high school, It's like kind of longing for that kind of simplicity in my life again. But I still enjoy where I am now. And also, just it's funny because this wasn't planned, but it does work. Because speaking of the simplicity of my like high school years and younger years, which was only a few years ago, so it's not like I'm old and that was like forever ago. But whatever. Speaking of simplicity, once again not planned, but that was actually one of my points that I was going to talk about with swimming in Miami is the simplicity of the track is surprising given the fact that when we were talking about Early Birdie in like our first episode, I described Maybe I'm Dreaming as very maximalist, and to listen to Of June be so minimalist. It's like such a crazy thing that I've never really noticed before because I've never really paid attention to the actual like instrumental and the tracks and the layering before until like maybe this past year or so. But I will say, even though I describe Of June as being minimalist, Swimming in Miami might be one of the more complex songs on the album. That and like probably Hello Seattle, but we'll get to that in another day. But Swimming in Miami is like it's still minimalist, but it's probably the most complex song on the whole album.
I actually never noticed that. Made the comparison at least between Maybe I'm Dreaming, and I guess since Of June was kind of the predecessor. Is it a predecessor? I'm pretty sure. Of
Yeah.
Okay. Um, that's a really really interesting point that you've made. It's kind of like he upped his game when he got to Maybe I'm Dreaming, and not that Of June is bad. I quite enjoy it, and as we've talked about nostalgia, simpler times, it is still really good and holds its own in a way, and I really enjoy that. So my next point, it's kind of veering away from this, but I found it really interesting because in Swimming in Miami, he about mid song, at first he starts off talking about like a captain of a ship, but then he switches and he mentions a train engineer, and I think that's a
Hmm.
really interesting comparison that he made to the two careers or job titles, whatever you want to call it. I'm like the captain of a ship makes sense to me, but what doesn't make sense to me is why he would mention a train engineer. But I like it, and I think it's kind of an interesting thing that you don't really hear about very often, and of course, especially not in music. So that's to be expected of Adam. But I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, that's something I've never really thought about before. Like, I don't know. Which I'll talk about more about the overall lyrics of June a little bit later because those are some of my points for the other two songs we're going to discuss. But like, I don't know. I haven't some of his older stuff like of June. I haven't like sat and like examined the lyrics as deeply. So I always don't. I don't normally pick up on stuff like that. Like I've of course examined lyrics to like later songs and whatnot, but like of June, I've never really examined lyrics, so I don't really pick up on that kind of stuff. So that's interesting. Um, but yeah, I will say I always kind of like one of those people who's like, oh, Swimming in Miami. It's kind of not overrated, but like I always like there's a whole bunch of fan hype around it, and I'm like, okay, yeah, it's a cool song and whatnot, but like I'm always reminded why there's so much hype around Swimming in Miami when I listen to it because it's so good. I especially love the last part of the song, which are the last part of the in. Let me see if I can figure out how I want to describe this. So I'm like specifically talking about instrumental tracks towards the end of the song when the last bit of lyrics, when the last chorus is being sung, that instrumental under that is like it's so beautiful, and I want to just bring that up because it's I think it's either the same thing or something similar happens under the chorus like halfway through the song as well, but like I don't know, the one that really stuck out to me like was the last part. I just find it really beautiful. The instrumental part is like I don't know, it was really cool. I enjoyed it greatly.
I agree. That was actually something I wanted to mention, but forgot to write down. So we're kind of on the same wavelength. But I find it really interesting, like I said during my first point, that the instrumentals are so long after. Like, there's a long intro and then there's a long outro. But it really makes the backing track shine a little bit more when there's not lyrics over top of it. And I do enjoy it. And Swimming in Miami, it makes a lot of sense that it's one of a fan favorite for sure. Um, I really enjoy like the snappy beat. It like picks up about midway, like you said it picks up about midway through the song, and it kind of gives a crisp sound to the beat, I guess. And the
Mm-hmm.
lyrics fit really well too. Um, Now it's actually something I've been studying recently about songwriting and things like that, and building your melodies around your lyrics when you're more of a lyrical person, but melodies don't necessarily stick out to you. Um, and I find it like really cool because I could see essentially how he could have built the lyrics first because of how snappy and sharp they are. And
Hmm.
it was something I was watching this afternoon actually was talking about how you find the rhythm in your speaking tone first, and then you can build certain parts of your melody around that. So I can see how that kind of shines through with Swimming in Miami. And I didn't even mean to go in depth to that point. But anyways,
Oh. Yeah, I mean, okay, that's funny because the like snappiness of like the beat was something I had actually written down for my notes and then ended up taking it out.
that's
So that's
funny.
funny.
That is so
We're like on
funny.
top of it, on the same wavelength with our notes tonight.
Hey,
Alrighty,
that's always
so
a good thing. I like when we're in sync. That's great.
it is helpful, We can kind of like we have like it helps give us a good flow for the episode. So I'm not gonna complain. But so swimming in Miami, I think we both gave it a pretty good review of being really well liked. Designer Skyline though. Moving on to Designer Skyline. I I will say, listening to of June and paying deeper attention to the backing tracks, I will say I've noticed a trend with his drums that he uses. Not like the ones he uses, but like the style he like I don't know, the way he like formulates his drum beats. And it's very I've noticed he usually has some type of like very simple kind of like once again, you're going to listen to me describe music without having any musical knowledge. But he's like this kind of like simple kind of back and forth, normal up and down, like one beat, next beat, one beat, next beat. It's very simple drums, and then he gets to like every, few bars or so, he gets to like this one or two bar length of like more complex drums, and then it goes back to the really simple beat for a few bars, and then he gets like this really quick, short, snappy, like complex drums. And I've noticed a trend with his drums that he uses, and I really picked up on it in Designer Skyline.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Actually, in my notes, I was gonna say about like midway through Designer Skyline, much like Swimming in Miami, there's kind of a beat change where he like speeds it up in a way, and I really liked that. And I can see what you mean about different how he structures his beats and things like that. And this EP is definitely, you know, a learning ground for him in the way he does that. So if you can already recognize a style, that's kind of cool because it's Owl City history. So, anyways, that's neat. That's really neat. But
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
yeah. There's a line he says, "A city of sparkles," and right about there, there's a bass line that really opens up and adds dimension to the entire song. And the minute that hit, I just was like, in awe because it made the track sound so much more deep and filled. You know what I mean? I got so excited about that that my writing on my page went a little bit scribbly. But I
I
thought
will say, yeah.
it was so cool.
But yeah, I will say big fan of like adding bass to songs. It adds so much more depth to a song. Like, okay, this is unrelated, but I've been really obsessed with listening to the Tornado instrumental lately. And I've been listening to, like, the really exciting part of the Tornado, the one part that everybody loves. And, like, I've been really listening to it. And at first glance, especially when you're listening to it and has the lyrics over it, like, the violin has a tendency to kind of, like, take the front seat and like kind of like first capture your ear and be like, wow, that's so cool. But if you really listen to it, the song would be nothing. Like it would be not nearly as good as it is without the bass that it has. And like, the
Oh.
bass really I feel like carries that whole section.
Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right on that. Especially if it's just the rest of the instruments, it there's no lyrics to fill the void, to fill the space.
Right.
So I can
But yeah,
definitely
that's
see.
that was unrelated. That was, just a little extra for y'all. um I will say this is continuing our little discussion of Designer Skyline. I am a big fan of Designer Skyline. It is a great song, but the one thing that basically made me fall in love with Designer Skyline is the one lyric that is like mountains in the Midwest. And I'm from the Midwest, so hearing the Midwest be mentioned just makes me very, very happy. And I love that lyric because I'm from the Midwest, and it just makes me so happy to hear it every time I listen to the song.
I was going to mention that too, the reworking the math and measurements until I'm convinced that these plans are picturesque like the mountains in the Midwest. It's so lyrical and I love how it flows. But I also really like the fact that he has songs about the beach. He has songs about the Midwest, and he's primarily from the Midwest, and so I think it's really nice that he pays homage to two of his favorite things. He loves the beach, even though he probably hasn't traveled at the time of making the designer Skyline, but I think it's really cool that he has two mentions and he doesn't forget about his homeland, his home state. And
Yeah.
I really like that. It's just such a sweet thing. So
Yeah, I will say that is like I find it funny that we both had that section in our notes because it is my favorite part of the whole song. So continuing, now that I've had my little discussion about lyrics, I got to get back into my like nerdiness of like discussing the instrumental because I've been obsessed with listening to like really studying the instrumental parts of music lately because I've been writing a lot of instrumental music, so it's fun to like listen and pay attention to those things. But the switch from I can't remember somewhere in the middle of the song, there is a switch from a synth to piano for a short period of time. And that little piano bit where there's no synth and it's just piano with the other instruments. That part is just so I don't know, it just adds this really nice refreshing element to the song. Like, you get so used to this like electronic everything sound in the song to then switch to just piano instead of having synth in there. It's so refreshing. I like that part. I've never noticed it before, but it just adds a nice little like refreshing piece, and then you get to like move on to the synth again, which I love the synth. The synth sounds great. I don't know, I never noticed the piano bit before, and it was really enjoyable to listen to.
oh, I don't think that I recognized that. That's really, really cool. I love that. And kind of on the same note, I think that the whole track sounds like a music box, but especially at the beginning and the instrumental bit, it sounds like a music box, which is kind of cute. So,
I do. Oh, it does have like that. Like it just, I don't know, sweet, gentle music. That is
yeah,
cute.
that's what I was thinking. Sweet, gentle. That's a really good way to describe it.
Designer Skyline is such a sweet song. I love it. Not in like, because like his other songs be considered sweet because they're like cute romancy songs, but like this is just sweet just because it is cute. It's just a cute little song,
It
just about
feels
a
so.
person designing a city, and it's cute.
It's warm and fuzzy. It feels like warm and fuzzies.
It really,
It's a
yes,
different kind
just
of romantic warm and fuzzy, but it's a warm and fuzzy nonetheless.
yeah.
But anyways,
So
continue.
So as we're kind of continuing to discuss types of lyrics he does. See, we're really when we just talk. I always like, it would just flow into the next point really well because this wasn't planned, but this is gonna help me segue into my next point as we're discussing his types of lyrics. I love his ability to make lyrics that don't. Now I feel like out of all the different songs in Of June, probably Designer Skyline has one of the most probably storyline to it, but he doesn't necessarily, especially in his early music, he doesn't write lyrics that necessarily tell a story, but they are like telling something. Like it is a story because it's kind of talking about this person who's like writing blueprints to this city or whatever it is, but it's also not telling a direct story, but there's something being told. And so it's kind of up for interpretation about what the song is really about. But also you can just, and since there really isn't much story to it and it's just kind of lyrics, you also can just listen without worrying about the story that's being told or trying to decipher the story. You can just listen. You kind of have options.
I like that. I like the fact that you pointed out you have options. So it's a little bit more flexible than field notes, but it's still telling a story of some kind, and that's kind of neat.
Yeah, I don't know. I've like people talk about the older lyric style versus the new lyric style, and I'm like, I've never really pinpoint. I mean, obviously, people keep saying that his lyrics back then were more dreamy, and it's like hard to really pinpoint it is, but I think it's really just because like he tells more stories now, like direct stories, than he did back then.
Yeah, that's true, and you know, we've kind of already touched on like the dream like lyrics. I guess you could say that the difference is he draws more from life than he did a long time ago. And when he was making this EP, he was more so, of course, he's drawing from life. An architect is a job that you can do. Somebody's designing the city, but in terms of experience, he may not have had any experience with that or with someone he knew having experience from it. We really don't have a way of knowing, but either way, I enjoy both his direct storytelling and his kind of abstract. We're gonna say abstract. That's a good word for it.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, and kind of as we go into our Panda Bear discussion, I kind of had like two connecting thoughts kind of between when I was listening to Designer Skyline and Panda Bear, kind of both focused around his lyrics because I mean, as you said, he tells more direct stories now, and then back then they were more abstract, and I feel like the older Owl City lyric style that kind of like people talk about is super present in Of June. Like probably one of the most like probably the best example of his more abstract lyrics is in Of June. And they I've noticed, especially listening to like Panda Bear, and kind of like I noticed a little bit, or noticed it more when I went back and listened to the other songs as well. But he focused less on having cohesive lyrics throughout the song, not necessarily stories, but like he'd even necessarily focus on telling stories in these songs, but like not even the lyrics themselves, even if they weren't telling a story, they weren't even necessarily cohesive with each other. and I noticed he more so has groups of lyrics that are put together. Like this little group of lyrics creates a thought, but then the next group of lyrics makes a sense together and they create a thought, but it's not related to the last thought at all. And I think that's also another big difference is they're just groups of thoughts rather than even trying to tell any type of story in his older style of lyrics. Especially with Upjohn. I feel like things changed a little bit more when we got closer to like Ocean Eyes, and especially with All Things Bright and Beautiful, he started telling more stories, even though they're more abstract stories, they were more stories. But Panda Bear, it's just non cohesive lyrics in little groups of thoughts.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of what happens with in not Designer Skyline, Swimming in Miami. There we go. Where he mentioned like the captain of a ship, and then he went to a train conductor. So I kind of see what you mean. Like he has little groups where one makes sense with the entire group, but the rest of it is it's sectioned out into its own thing. And I don't know. I feel like even with Maybe I'm Dreaming, the songs are much more cohesive because, you don't really veer off the general idea in Super Lunar Honeymoon that it's not about this actress and falling in love. It still makes sense to the entire song. So, yeah, I think that's a really interesting attention to detail that you found there for of June in general and Panda Bear and all that.
So, as we continue our little Panda Bear discussion, I do feel like at the very beginning, so the intro bit is very long, and I really love when Adam does long intros because I so appreciate his instrumental work. But dare I say, Panda Bear's intro was too long, with not much going for it, to be honest. Like every time I listen to it, this is a thing that happens every time. So I always expect that first synth to start like a whole bar or two before it actually does. And I always expect it to start stronger than it does. So it starts with like a beat for several bars. And then it enters continues the beat and then adds like this really soft synth for several bars. And then you have the beat, the soft synth, and then a stronger synth. And then like that continues for the rest of the intro. Man, gosh, saying synth is hard tonight. Um, but like that's not a lot going for it, to be honest. And it's like I always expect a good strong synth coming in after like a couple bars of the drum beat. And it doesn't. It takes like 4 bars before that soft synth comes in. And you can almost not hear it because it starts out so soft. And it's like, I appreciate your instrumental work so much, Adam, but that it's a bit too long with not much going for it. I'm sorry.
I could not agree more. You have taken the words right out of my mouth, and I'm sorry to all of the Panda Bear stands. But
If there are any.
I feel like there are though. I feel like there's several people that enjoy Panda Bear, and it's kind of flat in comparison to the rest of June. Even some of the simpler songs like Designer Skyline that we talked about a little while ago, and it has a much like very similar style in terms of the backing track is pretty simple. But other than the fact that it is kind of soothing, I'm pretty underwhelmed. Um, I so and especially because I've heard Panda Bear before, and I've heard everything else on of June. There's a couple of songs that I really enjoy that we'll get to next episode. But um, in terms of Panda Bear in conjunction or in comparison, not necessarily conjunction. I think that means something different. But in comparison, Panda Bear is so underwhelming. And the lyrics are there's not a lot there either. To be honest, the instrumental didn't really impress me, and nor did the lyrics. But anyways, continue.
So yeah, I mean, it doesn't. Yeah, I don't think it's any, and that's the weird thing. I don't feel like Panda Bear is any less simple than the other songs on the track. Like Designer Skyline's super simple structure, and like, but it's not any less simply structured. Like the amount of tracks I feel like that are going on, I don't feel like is much less than what's going on with Designer Skyline. I think the difference is the timing. He just did not great timing for this song. Like every part drags on for too long. Like each part that he adds a new instrument just takes too long in between place to place. And like Designer Skyline, as simple as it was, there was switch ups. Here a little bit switch up here, a little bit switch up there. There was some switch ups throughout the tracks. And so at least it kept it kind of interesting, even though it was simple. Designer or Panda Bear, as I said, like the intro is a good example of just how much it just kind of drags on for too long with not much going on. And but like once all of the tracks do come into play, I really do enjoy it. Like when you he does have all the tracks finally playing after way too long of waiting for them all to start, they do sound so good. Like I do love the drums and the synths together in this particular song. They go really well together, and just I've been getting a real kick out of listening to Adam's music and really paying attention to the instrumental tracks. And like when he does have it all playing, it's really good. But it just everything else leading to that little point in time where it's all playing together, it just seems like it takes forever. And like it's almost losing my interest.
The one thing that I could say about Panda Bear that I wouldn't say about any of the other tracks is that I would put it on a sleep playlist. It's just it's not, as you said, it loses my interest because there's not really any switch ups in it as they do with the previous tracks that we've discussed. Um, but it's like just interesting enough that I would put it on a sleep playlist because then my brain is not so engaged on all of the other little segments. Does that make sense? And that's not a
Yeah, it's
bad
like
thing, but I will say
no.
it has that going for it because I listen to music while I sleep all the time.
Yeah, it's I don't it is very soothing and calming, and but I don't unfortunately I don't know if that's what he was going for, and that just kind of makes it worse. Like it's
Yeah,
supposed like it doesn't fit with all the other songs. Like the other songs feel cohesive throughout the album, and then you have Panda Bear, which doesn't fit because the structure is so different than the other songs. It's just so plain compared to the other songs.
I don't feel like a warm fuzzy panda bear when I listen to it, unfortunately. Sorry, Adam.
Yeah. I mean, hey, we've given a pretty high review to Of June so far, even with its like we've even mentioned how Of June has lower production, but it's still so good. So like that's pretty great review for Of June. But like Panda Bear, it's not gonna go on my repeats list. It's not. I'm sorry, Adam.
Yeah,
I
it's
will say,
unfortunate, but yeah, continue,
yeah, it is
continue.
unfortunate. I will say because you mentioned earlier how he talks about a lot about the beach in his song, especially early on, and I feel like for some reason, and maybe it's just because I don't know, but anyway, I don't know what it is that gives it this vibe, but like I just get when listening to Of June in general, I just get this beachy vibe in general. And I don't know what
Yeah.
it is, and it's just very interesting. But yeah, that's I don't know if that's necessarily tied to Panda Bear. I I, I mean Panda Bear does give me beachy vibes, but that's also like all the other songs, so that's not necessarily tied to Panda Bear specifically though.
I mean, I feel like he meant to just because, well, number one, the Of June EP cover is like an ocean already. And number
Yeah.
two, like you, of course, you've got this woven into it. You've got mostly songs about the beach or like a person at the beach or
Or he's
a
mentioning like towns on the coast
yeah
or whatever.
coastal theme all around. So, but
I feel
yeah,
like
no,
maybe that's why Panda Bear gives me beach vibes. I think he said something about from coast to coast or something like that. I don't remember. See, Panda Bear, I'm sorry, you're a little immemorable. I can't even remember what the lyrics are. I'm
I
sorry,
I
Panda
I
Bear.
can't I can't either. Which is
So we're getting little ranking of the songs here. If I had to give the songs rankings, that is. Swimming in Miami, it's pretty high. Like I keep forgetting how good it is. I might actually give it like an 8 or 9 out of 10. It's pretty good. Like I forget how good it is, and then I'm just blown away by how amazing it is every time I listen to it. And I really do love swimming in Miami, so I'd probably give it a good like 8 or 9 out of 10. And then Designer Skyline is another just great song. One of the best songs off of June. I don't know. I might give it like a good 7 or 8 out of 10, maybe a 7.5 out of 10. It's pretty good. It's another really good ranking song for me. And then if I had to give Panda Bear a rating, it's not terrible. So I'm not gonna give it like a 1. And I feel like 3 might even be a little low, but like maybe a 4. I don't think it's quite 5. 3.5 or a 4 out of 10 for Panda Bear. Because, like I said, I once all the tracks were in play, I do enjoy it. It's just getting there is such a long journey, and it's not an enjoyable journey per se. Not the worst. It's not unenjoyable, but it's not engaging. So maybe like a 4, 3.5 out of 10, 4 out of 10. I don't know. What would you give the rankings out of each song out of 10 if you had to rank the songs, Sapph?
so for swimming in Miami, I would probably give it like a solid 8. So I'm on the same page there. And of course, you know, you can see why there's so much hype around it. It's a really good song. For Designer Skyline, though, I would give it like a 9. A pretty
Wow.
strong 9 because I really, really enjoyed it. It's probably one of my favorites off of June. And then unfortunately, I was gonna say somewhere around a 4 and a 5 for Panda Bear. Just yeah, because of the reasons we discussed, it doesn't have a lot going for it. But you know,
I'm sorry to all of you who love Panda
I'm
Bear.
sorry.
We just we can't be stands. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm so
we,
sorry.
we gave it a solid shot. I listened to it like 4 or 5 times, if not more, today, and it's not terrible, but it for me it doesn't deserve anything above a 5 for sure. Like maybe a
It's
5 at best,
you
but not really
listened
above
to it
that.
longer than I did. I gave it a one shot or 1.5 because I had to go back and re listen to some in the lyrics because it wasn't that outstanding. So I was like, well, let me go back and kind of re listen to some like re listen to some of these lyrics, and so I don't know. But anyways, that's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm thinking.
I feel like we've been pretty generous with our ratings for of June. It's I mean, hey, it's a solid EP, a solid album, whatever you want to call it. So it deserves those high ratings, except for Panda Bear. But you know, it deserves those high ratings.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us for the 12th episode of Shuttle Bus Podcast. Don't forget that you can follow us on Instagram at shuttlebus_podcast for more Owl City related content. You can ride along with us next week as we discuss the Airway, Fuzzy Blue Lights, and Hello Seattle. It will be our part 3 of June. For now, this is Sapph and
Faith.
saying goodbye. Goodbye, audience.
See you next time.
Woohoo!